Welcome to Revline Racing's official podcast. Revline Racing is a professional simulated racing team focused on being as competitive as possible on iRacing. Primarily competing in the Nascar iRacing series, Revline accomplished 29 wins, 15 pole awards, 83 top fives, and 5,248 laps led in the 2022 season. Hosted by Locke and Ryan Crofut, our podcast will allow listeners to hear firsthand how we perform week to week, what plans we have for the coming week, and the opportunity to get to know our drivers through guest appearances. Thank you for listening. Enjoy. Welcome to the Revline Racing Podcast. I am Evan Locke, Revline's media manager and one of your podcast hosts, and with me is co-host Ryan Crofut, the owner and leader of Revline Racing. Tonight we also have a very special guest as we bring on Revline Racing's road leader, Mr. Sean Rogers. And this week we're going to scrape the mud off the cars after we ran Bristol Dirt last week, and now we're going to head to a more traditional asphalt concrete type track where tempers flare and racing is extremely aggressive. Martinsville Speedway.
All right, so looking back at last week, Bristol Dirt, we had one win, 2 top fives, and a total of 10 laps led. So for a dirt race, I couldn't be happier with our guys and the amount of effort they put into practicing and stuff. And coming for a lot of these guys had no interest in the dirt at all prior to Bristol Dirt, and they really could care less if they even ran, right? So seeing them put in a lot of effort and be able to have some success at Bristol Dirt and get a little bit more comfortable at it, and hopefully have fun. I mean, I had fun in our practice sessions, so hopefully others did too, and hopefully they're more open-minded about dirt now, because I think dirt is a lot of fun. It's just not for everybody, obviously, but once you give it a shot, like a true shot, it's surprising actually how much fun it is, in my opinion. But how do you guys feel about it?
Well, I personally was in the camp of no interest in it. I did give it the old college try, and I did have fun in our practice. It was fun, doing something different. But ultimately, I didn't trust myself around other cars, so I elected to sit this one out for the greater good of the other iRacers out there.
Yeah, I went with the philosophy of sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, and of those 10 laps led, I led one, but it was the last one, and I got extremely lucky. I ran probably 3 or 4 races this week, and wasn't overly competitive in many of them. I mean, I was holding the line and things like that, but spending a lot of time just trying to learn. And man, I tell you, guys who know what they're doing, you can't stay close enough to even figure it out. With a lot of those guys, so you had to learn quick, and it ended up being a lot of fun. I was probably one of the biggest naysayers about it. I'm not a dirt guy. I don't really think cars that aren't built for a track type belong on that type of track in a lot of ways. But it actually panned out pretty good, panned out pretty fun. So overall, I was impressed with how the team ran. Really, really strong.
Yeah, and you were the one that picked up the win, right?
Yeah, buddy.
So for not being able to supposedly keep up with people, you managed to win it. So
Yeah, but let's to be clear, and the video is on our Facebook for those of you that are interested in maybe seeing how this happened. There was a green white checkered restart, and I started P8, and 4 guys took themselves out. I passed the 7th and 6th car, and then as we came around to take the checkered flag, the front stretch was blocked, and I just kind of got by the leader getting through the mess. So to pretend as though it was a skillful win would be misleading at best, but you take them how you get them, right?
well, you still got to be there to pull it off, right?
True enough.
Yeah, and we've seen that time and time again where you have a couple leaders battling and they take each other out, and you're able to dive under them or whatever. In this case, you went above them, but you can get by them anyway and pull off a win, and you kind of back into it. But nonetheless, you still have to be there to do it.
100%. Yeah.
So, how are we feeling about Martinsville this week? I practiced a little bit last night. Felt good in the car. Looking forward to this week. I don't think tires are going to play a huge factor in it, so that's nice to not have to worry about tires again for for a second week in a row. I mean, I think they could come and play at a certain point, but I ran 30 laps and was under a 20 second per lap run there for those 30 laps. So I could see, you know, where you might be able to gain a half a second or so if you took tires at a certain point, but you're not going to do that in the first 30 laps anyway. So I don't see it going green for 30 laps. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I'm looking forward to Martinsville, and that's pretty rare of me to say. I'm usually not one to vote for the Martinsville week, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah,
Go
yeah,
ahead, Evan.
No, go for it.
All right, I was gonna say, Martinsville's one of my better tracks, I would say. It's one of my favorite tracks to drive. One of my least favorite tracks to race for exactly the reason that you said is, you know, this is not a week we're gonna have very long green flag runs. It can get a little challenging. You know, eye pacing definitely comes into effect. But it's just gonna be about track position the whole race, making sure you stay up front, try to keep your car as clean as possible. And that's going to be the key. You know, you got to stay up front, and you know, because once you get back there with minimal laps, you're going to have tons of cautions, and it's very hard to pass. So that's something that we as a team are definitely looking to try to do. We got to hone in the qualifying set to keep get us up front to start, and we got to stay up there.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the key to Bristol, or sorry, well, Bristol too. Typically is track position, but yeah, I think when you talk about, you know, maybe gaining a half a second of lap time, that only works if you have the space to do it. And once you're back in the pack at Martinsville, it's not a passing friendly track, uh, especially a track where you can pass easily without being overly aggressive. To move or to get by guys this week, you're gonna have to potentially use the bumper a little bit. Not wreck guys, but just, you know, get them off that bottom line. You're gonna have to be a little bit aggressive getting into corners and things like that. So it's a track where aggression is required. The problem is you've got to be careful who you're aggressive around, because some guys aren't built to take it. They're built to give it, and that's it, right? So you got to watch out who you're around, and you kind of get to know the guys that you're racing around throughout a run. But that's going to be the key to the race is getting track position, maintaining track position, and just staying out of everyone else's mess.
Yeah, and that's a good point there as far as understanding who you're dealing with, because like you said, if you go and that's pretty typical of Martinsville, you have to get in there and use a bumper every once in a while, and like you said, you're not wrecking somebody, but you know, you're moving them up the track a little bit to get under them or whatever. But some people, like you said, can't take that, so you have to understand, you know, if you do that to somebody, you just gave them permission to do it right back, and if you don't know how to handle that, then you can't be the one using the bumper, you know. If you're going to be the aggressive, you also have to be defensive about it too, right?
Yeah, my philosophy on tracks like this is you take the first half and you watch the guys around you, and if they're the guys that are running through the guy ahead of you, well, they're not the guy you want to use the bumper on. They're going to make their own mistakes anyway. Once they wash up, then you just go underneath and you go by. You know, you don't need to be the guy that's causing extra tension, and that's kind of been my philosophy all along. I just run my race and read the room, read who's around you, and you know, you got to treat everyone the same in the sense that what's fair for one is fair for everybody, but you got to race people a little differently depending on what you're seeing around you, how they race each other, and you know, you kind of got to gauge. You don't want to be the guy in front of a guy that's running through everybody. So when you get there, you don't want to be giving them access to your rear bumper right away. You want to be able to make sure you can get by them and get a little run, get clear, and then stay clear.
Yeah, and one thing to reiterate on the tire fall off, like we were talking about, um, where that half second could come in play, and you were saying, you know, that you lose that track position, it's going to be hard to gain, which is true. It is going to be hard to gain. One thing that we found out last night, and Sean was practicing with us, is if you can do it right, you can make the outside line work, that second line work. But and I think if you had a half second different on tire, I don't think you would be even remotely close. I think you'd blow right by the guy on the outside. But you still, like, if you're too wide, I mean, there's not a third line, right? So same thing. It all just depends on where you're at on position wise and how many spots you have to gain, and if you're too wide, you're probably not going to go very far. So you're just waiting for mistakes, and unfortunately, in a too wide situation like that, they're probably, even if there are mistakes, you probably don't have enough room to make it work anyway. So
Yeah,
And
the reality is, no, go ahead, Sean.
I was saying that's the thing about this track. It's such close quarters that, one sideways car clogs up the whole track. So you got to be constantly aware, especially exiting these really tight corners. I know I'm a single screen driver myself, and plus with the pit wall kind of right there, it's hard to see those wrecks, coming out of the turn. So that's something you're going to be aware of. And it's definitely a track you got to keep your emotions in check, because you guys talked about, all the bumping and banging. Martinsville's a full contact track, and can't get frustrated early, put yourself in a bad spot, and take yourself out of it early.
And the reality is, with the way iRacing is set up, theoretically you are racing guys that are of similar skill and speed, right? That's why we have safety ratings, that's why we have iRating. And so that's why it's so important to limit your mistakes and capitalize on theirs, because theoretically speaking, you're all going to be about the same skill level, give or take. And so, making mistakes, even if you're fast, costs you so much, because you got to be dependent on other people messing up and making mistakes. And that's why it's really important to keep that patience mindset all through the race, even till the last lap. Um, you know, just last week, literally, I was handed a win because other guys wrecked, but the fact that I was in position to capitalize on that is what made the difference. So, and it's going to be the same this week, right? You don't get big gaps on short tracks. As soon as there's a big gap, you start catching lap traffic and things like that. And just like that, you're back to looking for his mistake, looking to capitalize, because you're going to be gaining as they're going through lap traffic. People fight a lot harder to stay to stay ahead of the lead lap car, or the leader, I should say, before they go a lap down, than they do to stay ahead of the second place car.
yeah, those are good points. So now we're gonna be taking a short ad break. When we come back, we'll be taking a more in-depth look at Sean Rogers' iRacing career. That's 2 weeks in a row I messed that up. And his contributions to our team, and how those contributions play a key role in Revline's success so far. We'll be right back.
Revline Racing's official podcast is brought to you by the following: Resurgence Apparel. Go to theresurgenceapparel.com for all of your apparel needs. Partnered with Champion Clothing, Casemate phone cases, and FlexFit hats. Before the Green and After the Checkers podcast. Found on all major podcast platforms. Kyle Tate voiceover and narration, for the ultimate source in turning your audiobook dreams into reality. Jerky Pro, the go-to snack choice for gamers and athletes. AIM Supplements. Aim above ordinary standards with simple, safe, high-quality nutrition products. Player One Coffee. Every bag roasted to order for maximum refreshness. Ma Energy. Get simple energy made just for you. Rex Pair, the ultimate tire puncture repair kit. All right, so welcome back with Sean Rogers, another one of the originals. Between the last 2 weeks, we've had, and now this one, we've had 3 of the originals of the Revline members. Sean has also been our road leader since October, and a team member since February of 2022. That road leader position has taken us to Daytona for the 24-hour race there in February, which was our first big outing as a road team, and Sean orchestrated that as well. Sean predominantly runs NIS. On oval, he's got 11 career wins, 163 top fives, 10 pole awards, and 1,600 laps led, sorry. And on the road side, we have, again, 11 career wins, but 71 top fives, 12 pole awards, and 170 laps led. So, Sean, that's quite a little stat sheet you got there, my friend.
Yeah, that's I've been iRacing now for about 2.5 years, so I just kind of built some of those stats up. Not as many wins as some. I finished in the top 5 is good enough for me. I don't get a ton of wins, but I still have fun out here doing my best.
fun is what it's all about, right?
No, absolutely.
Wow. Interesting concept from the road leader. I mean, I was hoping for a more competitive mindset.
Yeah, well, obviously we're out here trying to win, but you know.
No, I'm just tormenting. You have one of the most laid back personalities on the team, which has been a really nice breath of fresh air because I appreciate that. You know, there's all kinds of competitive mindsets and things like that that amp everything up when you're on the service, because that is, you know, a big part of it, right? Is that competitive side. So it's nice when you have someone that um, typically in your ear talking or whatever that's a little more laid back and relaxed. It really helps keep your focus on, okay, am I enjoying it? Am I having fun? And staying on that lighter side of iRacing, which is important.
Oh, I 100% agree with you. You know, I do try to stay chill. I do have a competitive side. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I'm out here giving out free spots or anything. And I do have my moments of frustration. I'm not the, perfectly level-headed, but for the most part, it's all about the vibes, man.
The vibes.
The
Yeah,
vibes,
no.
bro.
You and I have raced a few times. I know you've raced with Ryan and some other guys on the team as well. And you're one of the few drivers that, even in practice, I never seem to have run-ins with. You're extremely cautious of where you put your car. Not saying you can't make aggressive moves, but you're probably, in my opinion, you're probably one of the best on the team of just keeping your nose clean and understanding what's happening ahead of you, which is really where most messes occur, right? You don't typically get caught up in something that started behind you. So you do a really good job of keeping your nose clean. Does that come more from the road side or more from the oval side, or do you find it just kind of mishmashes together?
It'd be kind of hard for me to delineate. When I first started iRacing, I wanted to be a kind of more complete driver. As I mentioned earlier, I had no interest in dirt, so I have actually zero starts on dirt road or dirt oval. But when I first started, I was doing the street stocks on the oval side and the MX5 on the road side, so it'd be hard to tell where that came from. But mostly it's, you could do all these aggressive moves and maybe they will work. I'm sure they do occasionally. But more often than not, you're going to put yourself in a bad spot and you're going to finish, 12th when you could have just hung out and, kept your nose clean and finished third. So that's just something I've adopted kind of early on. It's much better to come in, fifth or what have you, than, take yourself out and take a 24th.
So you're one of those drivers that in practice, I don't personally like really worry about, right? So I'm just like when we do our practice race and stuff. So we do a practice session at the beginning. We do a short qualifier. Oh, jeepers! We do a short qualifier and then we do a practice race between our drivers here at Revline. So during that race, you're one of those guys that I don't really worry about. A lot of the time, you're somewhere around me, but I'm just not. I'm more worried about other drivers than you. And then out of nowhere, you're passing me, blowing by me, or going for the lead or whatever the case is. And it's one of those things where it's like you just don't. I don't worry about you because I never have to worry about getting wrecked by you or even like rubbing against you or anything like that. And then next thing you know, you're blowing right by me, and I think that goes kind of back to like you say. I tend to be more of an aggressive driver usually. I mean, it depends on the track. Some tracks I can rein things back a little bit, but most of the time I'm pretty aggressive. So I'm trying to run down Kanata or one of those guys, and then next thing you know, here comes Sean blowing right by both of us.
Yeah, that's something I've worked on. Because the racer in me wants to be super aggressive and going hard all the time. But I mean, with these cup cars, especially if you get on long runs, I mean, it's not going to be that big of a deal here at Martinsville. But the mile and a half and things like that, it's managing your tires is the best way to go fast, and just it takes a little discipline, and I'm not always great at it. But it's something that I constantly work on, whether it be practice sessions or in those race, when you are in a race situation, of just being conscious of your tires so that you have the speed to go forward. And then kind of funny that you guys are all talking about how you're I don't wreck you guys. When speaking of Martinsville, Evan, do you happen to recall our little skirmish?
Oh yeah, but that wasn't official. That was I feel like you got run into me more than you took me out yourself. You know what I mean?
We'll go with that.
Yeah, I do. Let me ask you this then, because you are probably one of the more well-rounded drivers on the team. On the iRacing service, of all the cars you've driven, of all the tracks, what what is your favorite combination of car and track, if you have one? I mean, I understand it's a lot, and a lot of guys just like to race, but what's your favorite combination of car and track?
There's a couple that stick out. I bet you most of my road wins are in the MX5 at either the Roval or Summit Point. Those are kind of perfect combination for me. I just happen to be good at them. Maybe that's why I like them so much. Obviously, you're gonna like things when you're good at it. But those are always a good time. The Formula One car at Silverstone's a blast. And then just on the oval side, Dover's one of my favorite tracks. Yeah, those are ones I just kind of have off the top of my head. But there's a lot of great combinations out there, and that's why I wanted to do both oval and road because there's so much content on the service, and to kind of focus on one. I don't know, feel like you're selling yourself a little short. I like to test out all the other cars, and I hope it as a primarily oval driver, I'd like to think that the experience of bouncing between some of those other cars has helped me in some way.
Yeah, I think as long as you're learning the skills that they provide, there's no downside to it. So I'm 100% on board. I try to be as well rounded as possible, but I'm glad you mentioned Dover because Dover is one of my favorite tracks to run on, which is also conveniently enough probably played a pretty significant role in how I got involved with Revline. I know both myself and Kyle Tate were both recruited by Ryan at Dover, and since it's right around that same timeline, I'm wondering if maybe that's where you got in contact too. I don't know this to be true or not. I just was curious if perhaps that's where you happened to be running at the same time when Ryan recruited you to the team.
No, because then I would have put a stink on it. And it wouldn't be my favorite anymore. No, I'm just kidding.
Wow.
No, I actually Ryan recruited me. I believe we were at Vegas, and I think I was in a fixed race. And I don't remember if we were talking directly, but I think we had a mutual enemy, and sometimes that can make the best of friends. But yeah, so it was actually Vegas. So um, it's been a year and a couple of weeks now since I've been here.
Yeah, I believe you're right. I think it was a mutual enemy type deal. I don't remember exactly what happened. I think you and I were running pretty close together for a long time, and then I think we were on the same even fuel strategy and stuff. And then I don't know if it was a lap car or anyway. Somehow we had a guy use us up, and we both were not happy with that guy anyway.
So then here's the real question: who won between the two of you?
I actually remember the results of that race. For me, I got second by it was a photo finish, and that's the only reason I remember it.
Was Ryan the one who won, or did you beat him to the line?
No, he was not the one who won. I don't know where he finished.
I don't remember what happened. I know I had damage, but I don't remember where I finished or anything.
It's interesting sometimes to hear those stories of how you came to the team and things like that because it kind of tells a little bit of a story, a little bit of the history of the team, right? Analyzing, what happened and it's funny because you run well at Vegas, so that totally makes sense to me as to how that could possibly have played into you becoming part of the team.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
so one of the things that I focused on when I was recruiting was somebody that's I thought had a similar mindset as me, but also somebody that showed certain talents in the car too. So when I was at Dover with you and Kyle, for example, Evan, I'm pretty sure I ended up. If I didn't win that race, I was up there. I was ahead of you guys,
Yeah, you ran well.
and I think I won it, but I don't remember. We were in Xfinity cars. I do know that, and I led a lot of laps if I didn't win. But you guys were running consistently in the positions you were in, and I believe we were all right around. Like I said, I think I won. If not, I finished in the top couple of drivers anyway, and then I think you guys were right around like top 5, top 10, right?
Yep. Yep.
And it wasn't so much a thing where it was like, okay, these guys are standing out, right? It was more so of these guys stayed consistently in their positions the whole time. And talking to you guys, I really liked the personalities you guys had, and it just felt right. The vibes were there, and I mean, it's one of those deals where you kind of go with your gut, and I'm happy to say that my gut was right. And it's not always right, but it was right there, and it was right with Sean.
Yeah, and you've built a very strong team, and of course, you don't do the primary recruiting anymore. But that core group, I feel like anyway, I feel like I speak for most of us, but um, we interact very, very well as a core group from that original package. And it's been nice that we all, including Sean, are on a similar wavelength as to what's needed and what we're doing and things like that. Because when you have that similar goal, everything kind of works much better and more fluid. And I think as we start looking at expanding into other areas, because obviously right now we predominantly run NIS, but as we look at where the roadside could take us and what we want to do with that, I think it's interesting, what Sean's vision might look like there, because I think we all have opinions on what maybe should transpire. But as the road leader, of course, Sean kind of sets that vision and sets that focus, and so it's going to be really interesting heading into that. And perhaps Sean, if you want to share, you're welcome to share some of what you've got lined up for the road team.
Um, it's not something that, as everybody knows who listens to the podcast, we're primarily an oval team, and I kind of just led the special events, I guess you could say, on the road side. We have competed in the Daytona 24, as you said, had a really good finish there. Sebring wasn't great. But that's something that, as we kind of grow more, we can look more into the road side. As of now, I don't have any special events. I don't think for another couple months, I'm sure we'll get some. I'm sure Evan, I know you ran Daytona with us, and I'm sure we could talk a few of the other guys into doing the 6 hours at the Glen. It's a much smaller event than 24, a lot smaller of a time commitment. And then you could look at the Petit Le Mans at Road Atlanta. I think that's later in the year. But those are events that kind of gauge interest, and I know that me and Schmitz will definitely try to participate. We already got 2 under our belt, and try to get a win on the roadside. That would be great.
Yeah, it'd be cool to bring one of those trophies home to Revline for sure.
Yeah, and like you said, one of those things with the road team right now is we aren't really in a good position to where we can actively recruit and build that, just because of how much we're focused on the oval side and the things happening there. I mean, we have some really big stuff in the works that we can't really talk about yet, but we're excited for what's coming, and those things that are coming are going to take us a couple months to build and prepare and stuff. So it's really all hands on deck kind of for that stuff. So it's one of those things that just doesn't really make sense to build the road team right now. Not that I'm obviously opposed to it, but it would be pretty difficult to pull that off while pulling off the other stuff too.
Exactly.
Yeah, you never want to detract from your bread and butter, right? That's the reality.
I think once we're done with this big project that we're about to take on, once that happens and we're done with it, and it's somewhat sustainable, I guess, I think that'll open the door up for a lot of different areas, and I think the roadside will be one of those. So I don't know if we really need to force the issue. Yeah, I don't really know if we need to force the issue is my point, I guess.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yep, I agree. But definitely look for us in the major events. I know because it's easy to plan for the the special events because you can kind of work on it here and there as opposed to doing the weekly grind. That would be tough to fit in with all the oval stuff.
Yeah, I will say that about road. We on the oval side, typically speaking, and I say typically because there are exceptions to this, but typically speaking, we run an oval or a tri-oval. We figure out a couple straight stretch, a couple corners, and you know, you dial your setup in based upon that. We don't have a lot of elevation change. We don't have the switchbacks and things like that. So when you're good at building setups for the oval side, doesn't necessarily translate over yet to the road side. And so to nail like for us as a driver, once we nail the course, we're good. With road, there are so many more turns that to figure out and analyze, and nailing one corner might actually put you in a worse position if it affects how you turn into the next corner. It's a completely different mindset to run road, and I think that's probably I don't even necessarily know if I'm making sense on I know what I'm saying in my head, but there's so much more in a way to running road as how you approach it as a driver, right? You can't just get on the straight stretch and assume you're going to be fine for the next corner, because every car impacts how you take that corner, and you have to be setting everything else up so much more differently. You have to look at the course differently. Does that make sense? Instead of thinking about the next turn, you got to be thinking about the next 3 or 4 turns in succession to set up a pass.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, in these special events, you got the multi-class racing. So I know we drive the GT3 class. You have the LMPs, the LMDHs that are significantly faster than you. And that's a whole nother element, is you got to be constantly watching your mirror. And then, we've done the endurance stuff. That's always a whole whole nother thing, because you find yourself, on 3 hours of sleep racing your, fourth hour, you know, second or third hour in a row, and you're tired and having to get through that and still run, your lines.
Yeah, absolutely. Ryan, I think I'm going to turn it over to you completely from here on out, my friend. I think I've tapped Sean for every piece of information that I was looking to get out of him. So I don't know what you've got left, but by all means.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a whole lot left. I guess the big question, I try to ask this to everybody we have on the show, and I don't know if I did a really great job at it the last couple of weeks, but the big question I like to ask is, what do you think of Revline so far? Um, what do you want to see in the future? Good things that you've experienced with Revline, bad things. What are you feeling on the Revline topic?
Yeah, I'm excited for the things that we, kind of got coming up. Obviously I've been on the team for a year and some change. So, I've been here for a long time. I good friends with you guys, all the originals, and, a bunch, a lot of the guys that we've picked up over time, some have been here for quite some time already. So, I've made some great friendships as a part of this team. I enjoy racing with y'all. And yeah, just you know, looking forward to the future and seeing where we could take this.
Yeah, good to hear. So I guess that would be it. Evan, you want to close this thing up?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. As always, much of the ending message is the same, but it's really important how we present ourselves to you, and our first opportunity to do that, of course, is with social media. And so we would love to have you take part with our social media engagement, whether that be through Facebook, Instagram. We're growing on Twitter a little bit here as well, really trying to push that. Our content is changing a lot. You'll notice that we have started doing this podcast, obviously, which we're so glad to have you listen to. Very glad to have you engage with each week. But we've also been getting into more video content and sponsor content going forward. So really glad to have you along for the ride. Super thankful to have you here. Thank you to Ryan and Sean as well for participating in this podcast again this week. Always great to have guests along and see what they have to offer, see what they have to say, and we're really looking forward to having you back next week for the next edition of the Revline Racing Podcast. Thank you for listening to Revline Racing's official podcast. Tune in next week for the next episode.